The prototype arrived at the Soviet Army testing grounds in late 1951, wrapped in oiled cloth and accompanied by technical diagrams drawn in precise black ink. The officers examining it noticed immediately that it did not fit comfortably into any existing category. It weighed more than a service pistol, but less than a submachine gun. It featured a selector switch that allowed for both single shots and automatic fire. Most surprisingly, it came with a wooden stock that detached completely and transformed into a holster. This was the Stechkin APS, and it represented an attempt to solve a problem that had become increasingly apparent during the final years of the great global conflict. Soviet military doctrine had evolved rapidly during those years. Tank crews, artillery operators, and vehicle drivers found themselves in situations where a standard pistol offered insufficient firepower, yet a full-sized rifle or submachine gun was too cumbersome for the confined spaces of an armored vehicle. The Stechkin was engineered specifically for this gap. It needed to be compact enough to store in a tank turret or artillery tractor, yet capable of delivering sustained fire if the crew was forced to dismount and protect themselves. The wooden stock was not merely an accessory, it was central to the device's function. Without it, automatic fire from such a small frame was nearly uncontrollable. With it attached, the Stechkin became something closer to a compact carbine. The 918mm Makarov cartridge had been recently standardized across Soviet sidearms, replacing the older 7.62 Kag 25mm Tokarev round. This new cartridge was less powerful, but more controllable, which made it suitable for automatic fire from a lightweight frame. The Stechkin's magazine held 20 rounds, double the capacity of most contemporary pistols. The combination of the selector switch, extended magazine, and detachable stock created a piece of equipment that occupied a unique position in the Soviet arsenal. When the officers conducted the initial trials, they observed that the Stechkin performed exactly as the blueprint suggested. In semi-automatic mode, it functioned like any service pistol, reliable, accurate at typical ranges, and easy to carry. When the selector was rotated to automatic and the stock attached, it transformed into a close-quarters suppression tool capable of emptying its magazine in approximately 2 seconds. The engineering was sound. The question was whether the Soviet military actually needed this hybrid capability and whether personnel could be trained to use it effectively in the chaotic conditions of actual engagement. If stories like this help you see how engineering quietly shaped history, tell us in the comments what surprised you so far. And stay with us for the next chapter. Igor Yevgenyevich Stechkin was not a specialized designer by training. He had studied mechanical engineering at a technical institute in Moscow during the 1930s, specializing in precision manufacturing and industrial machinery. His entry into this field came during the 1940s, when the Soviet government mobilized technical specialists across all industries to support the national effort. Stechkin was assigned to a design bureau focused on small-scale engineering, where he worked under more experienced specialists who were racing to improve Soviet equipment in response to innovations observed on the field. By 1949, the major hostilities had ended, but the design bureaus continued their work. The Soviet Union was entering a new era of geopolitical tension, and military planners were reassessing their equipment needs based on lessons learned during the previous decade. One persistent concern was the armament of vehicle crews and support personnel. Standard pistols, like the Tokarev TT-33, had proven adequate for basic self-protection, but the chaotic close-quarters encounters in ruined cities and forests had demonstrated the value of automatic fire. Larger submachine guns like the PPSH-41 provided this capability, but they were too large to be practical for personnel whose primary job was operating a tank, driving a truck, or managing radio equipment. The Soviet military issued a design competition. The requirement was specific: create a compact tool with automatic fire capability that could be easily stored in vehicles, yet still provide effective firepower in emergency situations. Several design bureaus submitted proposals. Some engineers attempted to scale down existing larger models. Others proposed elaborate folding mechanisms for rifles. Stechkin approached the problem differently. He reasoned that if the item was to be vehicle-mounted, it would almost always be used with some form of support, either braced against the vehicle itself or used with an auxiliary stock. This insight allowed him to accept higher recoil forces in the base design, compensating for them through the detachable stock rather than through increased weight. The pressure Stechkin faced was not merely technical, but also professional. The Soviet design bureaus were competitive environments where failure meant reassignment or loss of prestige. Other designers had longer track records and more institutional support. Stechkin was proposing something that defied conventional logic, a handheld device with a cyclic rate of fire approaching 750 rounds per minute. Many of his colleagues were skeptical that such a design could be practical. The wooden stock, which doubled as a holster, was particularly controversial. Critics argued that it would be fragile, that personnel would lose it, and that the dual-purpose design would compromise both functions. Stechkin insisted that the concept was sound, that the engineering would support it, and that testing would prove its value. The operating mechanism of the Stechkin APS is based on a simple blowback principle, but the execution required precise engineering to manage the forces involved in automatic fire. In a blowback system, the barrel is fixed to the frame, and the slide is not locked to the barrel during the cycle. When the round is fired, gas pressure pushes the projectile forward and simultaneously pushes the case backward against the face of the slide. Because the projectile is much lighter than the slide, it accelerates rapidly and exits the barrel within a fraction of a millisecond. The slide begins moving backward more slowly due to its greater mass. The timing is critical. If the slide opens too quickly, before the projectile has left the barrel and gas pressure has dropped to safe levels, the case can rupture, allowing hot gases to escape and potentially damaging the mechanism or harming the operator. Stechkin addressed this through careful calculation of slide weight, spring tension, and barrel length. The slide of the APS weighs approximately 300 grams, substantially more than typical pistol slides. This additional mass delays the opening of the breech by a few milliseconds, which is sufficient for the projectile to exit and pressure to drop. The recoil spring is housed below the barrel in a guide rod configuration. When the slide reaches the rearmost position, the spring is compressed to maximum tension. The extractor has pulled the empty case from the chamber, and the ejector has cleared it through the ejection port on the right side of the frame. As the spring pushes the slide forward again, it strips the next round from the magazine and chambers it. If the device is in semi-automatic mode, the disconnector prevents the hammer from falling until the trigger is released and pulled again. If the selector is set to automatic, the hammer falls immediately when the slide returns to battery, firing the next round without any additional input from the operator. The selector mechanism itself is elegantly simple. A rotating lever on the left side of the frame physically blocks or allows the movement of the disconnector. In the safe position, the trigger cannot be pulled at all. In semi-automatic mode, the disconnector functions normally. In automatic mode, the disconnector is bypassed entirely. This mechanical simplicity made the tool reliable and reduced the number of components that could fail in field conditions. The wooden stock attachment system uses a metal bracket that locks into slots, machined into the rear of the grip. When properly seated, the stock provides a rigid connection that significantly improves control during automatic fire. The weight of the stock also shifts the center of balance rearward, making it easier to hold steady. When the stock is removed, internal padding allows it to function as a holster without the need for any additional carrying equipment. Do you think this design choice was inevitable or a risky gamble at the time? Share your view in the comments and pass this story to someone who enjoys understanding how things really work. Testing began in early 1952 at military proving grounds outside Moscow. The initial trials focused on mechanical reliability. Could the tool fire continuously without jamming, and could it withstand the rough handling expected in service? Engineers fired thousands of rounds through multiple prototypes, documenting malfunctions, measuring wear patterns on critical components, and analyzing the behavior of the recoil spring under extended use. The basic mechanism proved robust, but several issues emerged that required refinement. The first problem involved magazine feeding. The 20-round capacity meant the magazine spring had to exert considerable force to lift the entire stack of rounds. Under certain conditions, particularly in cold weather or when the magazine was fully loaded, the spring tension was insufficient to reliably feed the last few rounds. Stechkin's team redesigned the magazine spring with variable coil spacing, tighter coils at the bottom where the force requirement was greatest, and looser coils at the top. This modification solved the feeding problem without increasing the overall length of the magazine. The second issue was more subtle and related to accuracy during automatic fire. While the wooden stock significantly improved control compared to firing without it, testers observed that the muzzle tended to climb rapidly during sustained bursts. This was partly inherent to the design. Lightweight automatic tools naturally exhibit muzzle rise, but it was exacerbated by the grip angle and the position of the recoil spring. The team experimented with different grip angles and eventually settled on a compromise that reduced climb while remaining comfortable for single-handed use in semi-automatic mode. Durability testing revealed that certain components wore more rapidly than expected. The extractor, which pulls the empty case from the chamber, was originally made from standard tool steel. After several thousand rounds, extractors began to crack at the hook where they engaged the rim of the case. The material was changed to a harder alloy, and the geometry was slightly modified to distribute stress more evenly. Similarly, the recoil spring guide rod showed wear marks where it contacted the frame during cycling. This area was reinforced with a hardened steel insert. Environmental testing exposed the wooden stock to moisture, extreme cold, and heat. The initial wood finish proved inadequate. Stocks exposed to rain began to warp, affecting the alignment with the grip. The solution was a more durable varnish and the addition of metal reinforcement plates at stress points. These modifications added a small amount of weight, but ensured that the stock would remain functional even after prolonged exposure to harsh conditions. By late 1952, most of the significant issues had been resolved, and the tool was recommended for adoption by the Soviet Army. The true genius of the Stechkin APS is not visible in its operating mechanism or its rate of fire. It resides in a design choice that seems almost mundane, until its implications are fully understood, the wooden stock that transforms into a holster. This single component reveals more about the constraints and priorities of Soviet military engineering than any other feature of the design. Consider the problem from first principles. A vehicle crew member needs to carry a piece of equipment, but space inside a tank or artillery tractor is extremely limited. Every item must justify its volume. A small sidearm can be worn on a belt, but a larger automatic tool requires a dedicated storage rack or has to be held constantly. If the device requires a separate stock to be controllable, that stock becomes another item to store, another component to keep track of, and another piece that can be lost or forgotten during the chaos of movement. Stechkin's solution was to make the stock and holster the same object. When the tool is not in use, the device fits into the hollowed wooden stock, which is then worn on the belt like any other holster. When immediate capability is needed, the device can be drawn and used without the stock, just like a conventional sidearm. But if the situation allows even a few seconds of preparation, the stock can be attached, transforming the tool into something far more capable. This design eliminated the need for separate storage of the stock and ensured that the support was always available when the equipment was carried. The psychological implication is equally important. Personnel are more likely to actually attach and use a stock if doing so does not require searching through gear or retrieving something from a storage compartment. The integration of stock and holster meant that the enhanced capability was always immediately accessible. This removed a potential barrier to effective use that might not be apparent in controlled testing, but would certainly matter in actual field conditions. The wooden construction was not merely traditional or aesthetic. Wood absorbs vibration better than metal, making the stock more comfortable against the shoulder during automatic fire. It can be shaped ergonomically to fit the human body in ways that would be difficult and expensive with stamped steel. It does not conduct heat or cold, remaining comfortable to touch in extreme temperatures. The weight of the wood, rather than being a disadvantage, actually helps stabilize the device during use. This integration of functions, storage and firing support combined in a single component represents a sophistication of design thinking that goes beyond mechanical innovation. It reflects an understanding that a tool's effectiveness depends not only on its engineering, but also on how well it integrates into the practical reality of service. The Stechkin APS was designed for actual personnel in actual vehicles, not for idealized conditions on a testing range. The Stechkin APS was officially adopted by the Soviet Army in 1951 and began production in 1952. It was issued primarily to artillery crews, tank crews, and special operations units. The weapon's official designation reflected its intended role. Automatические пистолеты Stechkina, or Stechkin automatic pistol, emphasizing its hybrid nature. Production continued through the 1950s, but by the early 1960s, the Soviet military began to reconsider its doctrine regarding sidearm distribution. The reality of field use revealed that the Stechkin's automatic capability, while technically impressive, was difficult to exploit effectively. Even with the stock attached, sustained automatic fire from such a compact device required considerable training and practice to control. Ammunition was expended rapidly, and the accuracy advantage over semi-automatic fire was marginal except at very close ranges. For most vehicle crew members, who were primarily trained to operate their machinery rather than engage in direct combat, the added complexity of a selective fire tool was not justified by practical advantages. The standard Makarov pistol, simpler and lighter, became the preferred sidearm for most Soviet troops. However, the Stechkin found a different life among special operations forces, security units, and certain specialized services. These users had the training time and tactical need for its unique capabilities. Naval units and airborne troops appreciated the compact firepower for close-quarters situations. Security organizations issued the Stechkin to personnel who might need to respond to threats in confined spaces where a rifle would be impractical. In these specialized roles, the engineering proved its value. The legacy of the Stechkin APS extends beyond its direct military service. It demonstrated that a selective fire pistol was mechanically feasible and could be made reliable, even if the tactical doctrine for such a tool was narrower than originally anticipated. Later equipment, including the Czech Scorpion and various machine pistols developed in the West, would explore similar concepts of compact automatic tools, occupying the space between pistols and larger submachine guns. The Stechkin proved that this middle ground existed as an engineering possibility, even if it remained a niche requirement in practice. Igor Stechkin's career continued beyond this single creation. He contributed to the development of other equipment and manufacturing processes, though none achieved the recognition of the APS. The tool that bears his name remains in limited use even today, more than 70 years after its introduction, a testament to the fundamental soundness of its engineering. Its greatest contribution was not in transforming military doctrine, but in proving that elegant engineering solutions could exist for problems that seemed contradictory. How to make a compact frame powerful, or how to make automatic fire controllable from a handheld device. The Stechkin APS answered both questions through careful attention to mechanism, materials, and the human factors of actual use. If you enjoy calm, true stories about how engineering shaped the world, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tell us from which country you're watching.